David. David.
Dave, are you in the fridge again? Get out of the fridge.
David.
What is up, everyone? This is the David Wells Experiment, and I'm your host, David Wells. So, if I say The Office, you're probably grinning right now. Or maybe you're one of those people like, I never cared for it, or I didn't watch it. And then the people who were grinning were like, what? So yeah, I'm a fan of The Office. And anytime I see somebody with a Dunder Mifflin shirt coming through work, I just think, Dunder Mifflin, the people paper company. Or Dunder Mifflin, the people paper company. Yeah. So, or I'll just, hear da-da-da. I better not keep humming all this stuff or else, get a copyright strike. Or who knows. I would say it's fair use. I'm saying it to make a point. So anyway, I know for a lot of people, the day Netflix died was when The Office disappeared from their platform because everybody and their mom was making a streaming service, and the people who owned the rights to The Office decided we're going to put it on our streaming service. So the funny thing is, not too long ago, I did wind up getting Peacock just to have The Office on. But for some reason, I didn't play it in the background like I would The Office on Netflix. I don't know if it's like a phantom limb thing where it's like, oh, this isn't the exact same thing. But it was one of those things where, if I didn't like the house being quiet and I wanted something on, I would put The Office on, because it would be one of those things where if you did just stop and start to watch it, you'd be engaged with it. But the great thing, and it makes you wonder, why is The Office as popular as it is? Well, we came this close to never finding out the answer to that question, because if you know The Office, then you know that first season was first-rate cringe. I mean, some people talk about Michael Scott having unbearable moments in the latter seasons. Well, the character almost killed the show in 6 episodes. And it's one of those things where people who say, oh, have you seen The Office? And like, yeah, I tried to watch the first season and I just couldn't get past it. And like, oh, well, you have to watch the other seasons. It gets better. And it's like, it really does get better. They knew they had to tone it down. I think they were still drawing a lot of influence from the British version of this show. And so they decided we don't have to copy it as verbatim. Let's make Michael Scott a little bit more likable. And that plan worked flawlessly. And, Michael, I think one of the reasons why Michael Scott is such a great character for like a show is because I think we all relate to Michael a great deal. And I think his arc is brought to fruition in that final cameo in the last episode when he's at Dwight's wedding and he's going to be the bestest Minch. And Dwight turns around and he's like, Michael? And Michael's just smiling. And then Dwight's like, I can't believe you came. And he's like, that's what she said, tearfully. And so it's like, oh, what a throwback. And then Michael talks with Pam and she finds out that he's happily married with Holly and they have so many kids that Michael has to pay for 2 plans for 2 phones. And I think that totally bookends what Michael was always after. I think what Michael was always after was just love. And for whatever reason, he couldn't find it successfully. He would always think he might think he had found it, but somehow it'd get ruined. And a lot of times it would usually be because of his own behavior. Like he'd do something that just wasn't cool. And people are like, how did you think this was going to turn out by acting this way? But one of the things that it does, which I don't think the British show does, that, and maybe I'd have to go back and watch it. I think one of the things that the American Office does better than the British one is, we get sort of a peek behind the curtain of like what makes Michael tick. His parents' divorce, or I don't know. Well, anyway, his mom marries somebody who's not his dad, and he's not happy about that. And life just keeps, it seems that throughout his life, he keeps having such bad moments that it kind of, it skews him a little bit. So really, he's just looking for love, but because of what he's been through in life, the way that he perceives the world and interacts is a bit off. So I think people find it relatable that when they're looking for something they feel like they need, that search and that hunger for that causes them to act a bit nutty. Now, I think one of the things is they couldn't have done, I wonder if they could have done any more seasons of The Office than they could have. And I don't think well, when Michael left, I don't think they could have gone past the amount of seasons. They had 2 more seasons when Michael left, and that was it. And I think one of the reasons it had to be that way is because throughout the whole run of the show, we get the feeling of like, man, Michael Scott is like the one black sheep in the office. He's sort of the lunatic running the asylum. And I think we needed both final seasons to prove like, no, he's not. You guys have all got your own problems, because it really begins to hone in on stuff like, Jim not being totally honest with, or kind of sidestepping Pam a little bit and making major life choices. They have their issues. Um, Andy and Aaron, their whole thing, I really think it's a shame that they didn't wind up together. And yeah. Oh yeah, let's not forget Ryan and Kelly. Ryan is interesting in that he didn't have to turn out the way that he did. But he almost is sort of a companion piece to Michael, because he's searching for something, but it isn't. I think one of the reasons why we dislike Ryan as opposed to Michael is him and Michael are both looking for something, but Michael is looking for love, and we can sympathize with that even though he does odd things. Ryan, on the other hand, you'd think he's maybe just at the beginning of the show just trying to start his life and, make his way, which is relatable. But then he gets a taste of power, and, that becomes his main thing, and it eschews his behavior. So, but not nearly as in a likable way as Michael. And, I'll say this. I think we've all known somebody a little bit like Angela and Dwight. Like I can certainly relate to her in some aspect. Like, she grew up in a very religious, rigid household, and there's a very specific way of you doing things. Probably one of the reasons why she's an accountant, because it deals in such objective values, very yes-no statements. It's a very binary world. So that must fit with her. But the thing is, when you live with such a rigid code, and things don't go that way, it builds up tension. So you wind up sort of like breaking the rules you say you follow. And I know it kind of makes her character like a bit relatable. Like, even though people like think, dang, why'd you have to say that? Why'd you have to go there? I think in some ways people can be relate to, you having a set of rules and just being frustrated when nobody else follows them. I I think it's kind of that way with Dwight. Although Dwight, he kind of makes me think of one of those kids who grew up in a really strict household, but then he got like a little bit of freedom, and so he like took off. But still, there's that part of his DNA which is just, you've got to give 100%, and yeah, like, so of course him and Jim don't get along. And then just, Jim and Pam are like the regular people that, I mean, that's why we fell in love with them, you know. So yeah, that's why their whole thing was like, oh, this is charming. They're cool. It makes me think of like the time that Jim came in dressed in Dwight cosplay and he was able to pull it off flawlessly. But then Dwight tries to do that to Jim and it just comes across as awkward. Um, it's funny as like they say like, wow, Dwight looking sharp. I can relate to Dwight in a way, like, because I really do hate it when people say, "Oh, I just work here," and they just think like I don't have to try. But recently I have gotten kind of frustrated, with my job because it feels like they do add on one or two things that's like, really, do we have to do things that way? Like, we did this thing where we try to give people only two sauces, and like if they've got like a fry and a sandwich, we'll give them one for each. And it was one of those things that I'm like, really, this is, we're gonna go by this. And it's so frustrating because when we really hammered this point, we could be so busy, and then like some customers were cool, but then it became this negotiating thing of like, come on, I need you to move. And like, no, I'm getting the sauces. And it's like, well, why can't I have this? Well, I got this, and this item. And so thank goodness the people who are very rigid with that thing and following it, like whatever. And okay, this is going to deviate a little bit from the point of The Office, but yeah, it's for a minute or two I'm going to just be ranting. Another thing that got frustrating is, so this so my store that I work at, we're located right by a Verizon, and for the longest time we were allowed to just use their parking spots because nobody ever parked there. And if they did, it was never filled to capacity, like not even by a long shot. It never got close to it. Then one day last year, they decide, hey, we don't want you parking in any of our spots anymore. So then we had to, go park over in Hobby Lobby's parking spots, and it's like a 5-minute walk. And it's like, man, we can't just have like, there are all these empty spots. And so they finally made a concession where there's like, okay, there are these spots next to the building, but if those get filled up, you got to go park in Hobby Lobby. And it's like, I feel like nobody has to go through this. Like, I feel like other jobs don't do this. One thing that really made me frustrated is, let's see. Yeah, so we used to have employee meals completely free, but then they're like, you don't get employee meals free anymore because order accuracy is inaccurate. And if nobody can get one, if one person can't have one, then nobody can have one. And at the time, all I did was clean the lobby. I didn't factor into it at all, but they're like, will that be discrimination? And it's like, no, it's not. I don't handle it. I mean, you could argue now that I'm handing people their food. That's the case. And then it fluctuated. And now we have a 50% discount, but we used to just get free food. And I kind of feel like they were just waiting for an excuse to like try to take it away. And it's just a shame because like other Chick-fil-A's I've talked to, they're like, yeah, you get free food. And what else happened? Oh yeah. So one thing that really frustrated me the other day was, so for the last 2 years we've been outside, I have no problem. I'll grab I'll grab a salad bag and I'll fill up a bag of ice because it gets hot out there and I'm out there all day. And so yesterday I was doing that and my boss is like, are you using the same bag from yesterday? And I'm like, no. I was like, well, go and bring your own because I don't want you using up Chick-fil-A's bags. I'm like, really? I mean, it's her business. She's allowed to do that. But I mean, how many bags do we waste a day? And I'm just using like, and how many do we drop on the ground by accident? And it's like, oh well. And it's frustrating. You know, I love her to death, but it's one of those things where I'm like, really? Um, but anyway, you know, let go and let God, all that jazz. But, and if you do look at bringing it back to The Office, if you look at Dwight, he does have sort of an evolution. It's so funny, like, when he starts to have his own business, you get that, like, okay, he's not totally psychotic. Um, one of the things I love is when, man, The Office did one thing which I thought was impossible, which is they made me hate Idris Elba. When Charles comes in, his character, and gets rid of Michael, he's super impressed with Dwight's go-get-him attitude until Dwight starts saying a bunch of crazy things, and he's like, you're making me look like an idiot. And so I feel like that was a ticking time bomb planted for the fans to be like, oh, he doesn't know what he's getting himself into, which is great. And yeah. Oh, I feel like I'm going to touch on the subject. I'm not going to touch on a subject that's going to make somebody upset. Or I'm going to not mention something and somebody's like, why didn't you talk about this? Or who knows? I'm not nearly that famous yet. So who am I kidding? But anyway, I don't think you could do like an Office reboot or like a sequel series because I think the whole thing was Michael needed love and his pursuit of that made him kind of crazy until he actually found it. And that point was made. And even in the latter half in the final 2 seasons, him being gone proves that everybody's that way. And so, I mean, maybe the only way I could see you doing it today is if it wasn't a reality TV show, like if it was, say, done in the perspective of a vlog or something, like I feel that would be the only way that you could take the original concept and update it for a modern era. But even then, we've got 10 seasons, which I keep repeating through how many times, and it's like, I couldn't see it lasting or doing that well. I mean, unless they had some really brilliant creative people behind it, which is why the American Office is so great. What other characters do I want to mention? I guess those are the ones that stick out to me. So so I don't know if this is real or not, but I have this theory. So in the final seasons of The Office, Pam goes and I think either she does work at a company or she thinks about it, But she works at another company where basically there's a guy who's basically a Michael Scott clone. And it's played by Bob Odenkirk from Better Call Saul. So my theory is he was one of the dudes who auditioned for Michael Scott originally, and he didn't get the part. So when they have this scenario of like, oh, wouldn't it be funny if Pam went to another office and there's another Michael Scott-esque character, they rang him up. So, yeah. Oh, one character I don't think gets enough love is perhaps James Spader's character, Robert California. I think it was interesting to have him on the show because he's so the opposite of Michael. Like, I think it was a smart move on their part before making Andy the regional manager of Dunder Mifflin, because they knew that whoever came after Michael was going to be instantly compared to him. And if they just made Andy the regional manager right away, it would have just come across as like, oh man, they tried to turn him into Michael because they knew he's gone, so we've got to have that same guy. So the only thing they could do is, and I think that's one of the reasons why Jared Leto didn't work as the Joker. I mean, you can have your opinion on his characterization, which I've talked about, and I would have liked to have seen him where he was going to go with it when he was Batman's main antagonist. But if we never have that opportunity, I'll just have to settle for his bit in the Snyder cut of Justice League. But anyway, one of the reasons why we loved Joaquin Phoenix, aside from it being brilliant, is he wasn't directly after Heath Ledger. Anybody who comes after Heath Ledger is going to be, they were going to get compared, and it might not have worked out. The guy who appeared in the Batman as the Joker, he'd be an exception to the rule. But I think they knew they had to have somebody who wasn't just like Michael so that we could get to Andy, who also, like Michael, was a people person, but it wouldn't just be seen as we're trying to turn him into Michael. I think that was the problem with the Cleveland show. Cleveland had his own character and his own personality, but when he got his spin-off, they basically just turned him into a black Peter Griffin. I think since bringing him back, I don't know what they've done because I don't really watch Family Guy anymore. But anyway, so yeah, that's my office. No, that's my episode about The Office. Haven't seen it in a while, but you know, Dunder Mifflin. That's just a fun word to say, isn't it? Well, anyway, this has been the David Wells Experiment. Have an absolutely super day, and we will see you next time. Bye.